When we talk about geographic risk, we're really asking how risky is the country itself from an AML perspective. Okay, maybe not only AML, because we have other important factors as well. A country's risk level can depend on multiple factors, such as sanctions, corruption, terrorism, criminal markets, secrecy laws, and finally, how strong its AML systems are. But what exactly is geographic risk? So, it is a risk that shows a company's exposure to certain risks, like above-mentioned sanctions, terrorism, and corruption, through connections with different countries. We're able to calculate this risk by factoring locations of incorporation, business operations, clients, or ownership and management links. Okay, so there are several factors that make a jurisdiction higher or lower risk. Sanctions are the most obvious indicator of geographic risk. If a country is under international sanctions, or even partially restricted, its risk level immediately rises. These measures usually reflect serious political or security concerns, such as human rights violations, terrorism, or weapons trafficking, which can directly affect the safety of financial transactions connected to that country. Next, we have tax blacklists and offshore financial centers. These are jurisdictions known for secrecy, limited disclosure requirements, or low tax transparency make it easier to hide the true origin of funds, perfect for money laundering. While not all offshore centers are illegal, their weak reporting standards and anonymous company structures create ideal conditions for laundering money. Corruption is another critical element. It's often measured using the Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index, which is an index that ranks countries based on how corrupt their public sectors are perceived to be. High levels of corruption typically mean that bribery, misuse of public funds, or political influence can help criminals bypass AML checks, making enforcement far less effective. Then there are criminal markets. If a country is a known hub for drug trafficking, human smuggling, illegal arms, or other organized crime, the proceeds from those activities almost always flow into the financial system. The higher the level of organized crime, the greater the likelihood of illicit funds entering legitimate channels. And, obviously, terrorism. It also increases geographic risk. Countries or regions associated with terrorist groups pose additional threats because financial institutions can be used to collect, move, or store funds that support their activities. Even small, seemingly harmless transfers can have serious consequences if they go undetected. We also look at regulatory transparency and cooperation. If a country refuses to share information with international regulators or has weak cooperation with law enforcement agencies, that makes due diligence much harder and risk levels higher. Finally, we assess the strength of a country's AML and CFT framework. In other words, whether it has effective laws, enforcement capacity, and how it performs in FATF mutual evaluations. All of these factors come together when we rate countries as low, medium, or high risk. Institutions often rely on external lists, for example, the FATF gray and black lists, the U.S. State Department's money laundering risk assessments, or the EU list of high-risk third countries. In practice, a risk rating matrix will take into account not only the country of incorporation and registration, but also the main country of operations. And separately, we also look at the nationality and residence of related parties, the shareholders, directors, and representatives. Each link to a high-risk country increases the overall risk profile. Here's a quick example. Imagine a company incorporated in Portugal, but operating mainly in Tunisia. Its directors are nationals of Algeria, and part of its revenue comes from Algeria and Nigeria. Even if the incorporation is in a low-risk country, so fine on paper, the overall geographic risk is clearly high and requires enhanced due diligence. Personally, I often use knowyourcountry.com, a website that provides free country reports with detailed scores across various categories of geographic and AML risk. So, to wrap up, these are 3 things to remember from this lesson. Geography multiplies risk. Each link to a high-risk country, whether it's where the company operates, banks, or where its directors live, amplifies exposure. That's why you should always map all jurisdictions, not just the one on the business license. Context matters more than lists. FATF, EU, or OFAC lists are only starting points. It's important to remember that the real insight comes from understanding why a country is at high risk: corruption, terrorism, secrecy, or poor cooperation. And mixed profiles need deeper checks. When a company has ties across both low and high-risk countries, always assess the weakest link. Even one high-risk jurisdiction can tilt the overall rating and demand enhanced due diligence. If you found this lesson useful, you'll find the full Anti-Money Laundering Basics course linked below. It includes all stages, red flags, and practical exercises to help you build real compliance skills.